So in this video, I want to talk about a tweet that's kind of been blown up, and it's been blown up in a ratio-like way, but the question of what ruined gaming. And this is an interesting question that I thought I'd throw my hat into the arena. I'm not going to steal the thunder. I want to look at this Twitter user and use the same kind of joke because it is funny. It is funny when esports people or people in a pretty specific niche that you could argue they've ruined gaming, and then they ask the question, who ruined gaming? The biggest thing that I think of, and some of these people I used to actually watch, or some of them I still do watch, when you have these streamers that just play these popular like multiplayer shooters or whatever, and then they complain and they say, well, there's no games out. Nothing I think ticks me off more in the world. This is by the way just completely separate, but I need to get this off my chest. Whenever I see these people that when you go on their YouTube channels and they play the same 3 to 5 games with their friends and they complain, they say, man, there's just nothing new out. And it's like, well, when you only play a very, very specific kind of game, yes, if you get bored with it, you're going to probably have trouble because you're only into a small niche. So there is some irony there, and tying it back, I guess, to this conversation, there is irony when people in a niche that you could very much argue have ruined gaming, if you want to say gaming has been ruined, and they're asking the question without even a second thought. They don't even think about it themselves. So I guess a question to ask is gaming ruined? Like, has things gone downhill? Look, I've said it before, I don't think we are in the golden era of games. I think there's more games now than ever. Just a simple look, you can look at Wikipedia, you can look at, well, every year the Steam, and any game that comes out on Steam, and there are tens of thousands, if not more, games that release on Steam every year. You look at that and you go back to like 2014, 2013, but if you want to feel old, go back to like 2009, 8, 7, and look at how many games come out in like a month back then compared to now. It is outrageous. There's definitely way more games now, but more doesn't necessarily equal better. And I think, look, do we still have like the major hits of every year and still some games that you could say every year kind of get added to your all-time favorites? Yes. Is it a byproduct of getting old that I think to my favorite games and they're not necessarily from the last couple of years? Yes, but there are some newer ones. Like I think of A Plague Tale Requiem last year as my favorite game of last year, but also one of my favorite games of all time. I can think to Life is Strange from 2015. I love that game. What Remains of Edith Finch, I think, was around the same period of time. If you go back to like Unfinished Swan era or Journey era, now you're like into the early 2010s. So, all right, you're starting to get a little bit older there. But there are some incredible games across Nintendo. You have Legend of Zelda. You have something like Elden Ring last year that just absolutely explodes. Every year, again, I do believe you can add some games to the overall catalog and say these are some of the best games that have ever been created. They still happen. Now, do they happen as frequently? I don't know that 100%. I'm not going to fact check myself on that one. Also, though, are there more like negative games? Are there games that really just don't hit as before? Maybe. And the final thing is just like where we're going as an industry, the shift in the industry. Is that going in the right path? And I say absolutely not to that one. That is, if I'm going to be pessimistic, and I have been for this kind of topic in the past, the idea of going the live service route, the idea of the esports stuff, right? These games that need to last forever, every open world game needing to be 200 hours long. To me, that is the issue, and that is a very big issue. You could go down the all-digital future. I know I've hammered that home quite a few times, but just the way the industry is going, no, I don't think it's going in the right way. Now, is gaming ruined? Is it literally like dead and gone? Well, no, I still think there's a chance, and I think gaming is something that's very special in that these companies, while they are becoming more and more rich and, gaming makes more money than any other, entertainment medium, we know this as a fact, I still think it's one of the last bastions where like things can kind of get invaded. And when there's something that really, when something really bad happens, like in a game, right? When they make a really bad choice or something, right? I think the turnaround is a lot easier for a game than it is anything else, or at least we see a turnaround faster and more effectively in gaming than we see, say, for Hollywood. When Hollywood continues to make the same error for like everything for like 5-6 years in a row, they still don't get it, right? And they're still doing the exact same thing. If gaming does, like when you have a Redfall situation, or you have like a Gollum situation. Now, Redfall, you can imagine that ship has turned around. Gollum, we'll see what happens with that studio, right? But you can see that shift. You can see, well, we can never let that happen ever again. Now, granted, those are very specific things. You could argue, like I said, the main weakness, I would say, of gaming is games that need to last forever. The argument that if your game doesn't get 30,000 concurrent players on Steam every day, it's going to be a failure. Not just that, though, but literally making games that require that to happen for it to be successful, that is a big issue, right? When you have all these live service games, and this is something I talk about quite often, one of my main gripes with live service and games lasting forever, yes, you have the examples of when they work, but the issue is you have like a very short list. Go on Steam right now and look at the top 10 or 15 games that are being played so often every day. There's so many concurrent players. Those are the outliers to me. Those are like the golden examples. Now everybody tries to copy those, and most don't make it work. Most maybe get a high first day or a high first week, and they completely fall off a cliff. You don't see every game doing that because time is limited. So yeah, when you see 15 games are doing rather well every day, they're getting players playing them. Well, think about the other 10,000 games that try to do it that all failed. And when that's a mindset of the executives, so okay, what's ruining gaming? Well, I think games that are supposed to live on forever, that's not by the choice of the developers, but by the choice of the executives. I think that is a big problem, right? When you have your higher ups saying, well, we need something like this. When you have, and I'll take some digs, when you have like the Gotham Knights of the world, or even maybe the Suicide Squads of the world, right? When you have these games come out where you can tell, now Suicide Squad's not out yet, but Gotham Knights, you can tell the live service part was there, and they ripped it. They just tore it straight out of the body of that game because they saw Marvel's Avengers. And what does that leave you with? That left you kind of with a shell of a game. Now, I don't hate Gotham Knights. I actually like it. Crash Team Rumble is a guilty pleasure for me right now. I actually love that game. I think the developers did a great job with the game, but you can look at that and say, well, did anybody really want a Crash multiplayer game? Well, did they even want it, right? Like, who told them to do that? And the chances are it wasn't actually them. Most times, developers get told what to do by the higher up. So I think executives looking at trends and trying to copy them, now that goes with live service, right? The games as a service and all that. Also goes with this open world stuff. I think you kind of got two different genres, two different like areas of gaming that are kind of getting attacked at the same time. The open world thing, and I think that one is a little bit more respected by people. Like, people have less of an issue with it, which is fine, and I understand it. For me, that is an issue. Every single game that comes out as an open world, there feels like there's a requirement for it to be X amount of length. In fact, Sean Layden, right, head of PlayStation back in the day, he warned of these kind of things, that every game kind of needing that to happen. Well, number one, that's going to cost so much money, that's unsustainable. It's going to take forever to make these games. And what do we have? These games cost so much money to make. These games take 4 to 6 years, sometimes even more, to end up making. And then are they full? Are they kind of full of fluff? Like, yeah, it's a 50-50 kind of thing. You have a game that's 500 hours long, or let's be more realistic, 150 hours. Well, is all of those hours good, or is some of them? And the answer is most times there is a lot of fluff. Maybe half the game is kind of fluff, maybe 25-30%. But what does that mean? Well, it means you could have made the game not 100 hours long, but then you wouldn't have that nice little metric to talk about online. People would say, oh, the game's only 40 hours, but it cost me $70. Well, in my head, I think an hour per dollar. Now, that's a consumer thing. We want to take some jabs at the consumers. Let me take some jabs at maybe some people out there. No, I've said it before. Honestly, I almost violently disagree with that mindset that a dollar is an hour. So when you pay $30, let's say, for like an indie game, you expect the game to be, and there are people that think that. Now, your money is your money. I have no right to your money. That's totally fine. You spend it how you want. I will just tell you respectfully, I disagree entirely. I think you can have an incredible 5-hour game for $30, and that could be worth it. But I do think, because of the consumers, because of the executives, they kind of like warp into the same thing where some consumers aren't willing to do it. Executives kind of pick that up and say, well, look, 5-10-hour single-player games, they're just not cutting it anymore. And we have seen a trend away from that, right? When you have these single-player, back in the PS3 360 era, when games would be 7 to 9 hours long, let's say, back then that was understandable. Like you bought it and you could play it once, you could play it a couple times, but you played it for that 7 to 10 hour story. Some of my favorite games of all time, Uncharted, the Uncharted franchise, Uncharted 2 and 3 are roughly like 10, 11, 12-hour games. Last of Us is a little bit more, like 15 or so hours, but like you think about that now and that would almost be considered crazy because it's like, well, you're paying so much money for it. Well, you were paying the same back then as you are now. Maybe it's $70 now versus 60, but these things kind of get picked up. So look, I know I'm going after the gaming industry talking about the problems. It's because it is true, like to an extent. I guess where I stand on this issue is this. There are major problems with the gaming industry. I do actually think we're not going in the right direction. I think we're going in the wrong direction. I think it can be turned around. I think it's the easiest to turn something around in the gaming industry versus anywhere else just because of kind of like rash decision making, which sometimes backfires, but sometimes it's actually kind of needed, right? So all those things I do believe to be true. I also think there are legitimate problems with the industry that aren't what esports people or whatever, again, as I talked about in the beginning, these genre specific people that live in their very closed bubble. It's why, look, I'm not good at many things on YouTube. My thumbnails are probably average to below. My editing is definitely below average. But what I do think I bring to the table is experience. Like, I've played so many different kinds of games. I'm not a one kind of person. I don't just play one kind of game. So I can speak for like more than just one thing as opposed to many others who can't do that. That's where I get upset at people like that, where it's like, look, if you play 2 games a year, I don't really think you're truly, I don't think you're qualified to talk about the gaming industry if you just play first-person shooters that are online or live service games. You can't, I don't think you can, yes, you are allowed to say what you want, but I really don't need to take you seriously when you say, what's going on with the gaming industry? Where's all the games? Why are there not any games for me to play on my YouTube channel? Well, if you, again, it's what I said in the beginning. If you just do one thing, well, no duh. Like, that's the thing I could just never stand with some people where they say, there's just no games releasing because, yes, I think, again, in terms of the entire industry, it is going in the wrong direction. I think the wrong lessons have kind of been picked up. I think there is some sort of correction maybe with the open world stuff. I think people are starting to tolerate games not being as big, and they're going to need to, because over the next several years, unless you want games to take 8 years, you're going to have to accept that not every game can be 100 hours long, right? So there's some things that are being pulled back, but that doesn't mean it's all bad, and I definitely, hopefully, have addressed that in this video. It's not all bad, and there are plenty of really good games. This year alone, there's been so many. I've played 16. I made a video that'll go up in a few weeks from now. I've played 16 new games this year. I'd say 14 of them are very good, and then as you get to the top, obviously they're extremely good. So every year you still got your slam dunk hits. You still got games that can do kind of revolutionary things and push the industry. Those things are still happening. It's just there's also a lot of bad things happening at the same time. So hopefully that was stated well enough in this video. So hopefully you had fun with it. By the way, I'll say at the very end, just to kind of get people to see if they got fooled or not, this background, nothing to do with Sony. Like, Sony is doing live service stuff, which I'm not a fan of, but this was just the first background I saw in my images, folder for a background for the green screen here. It's got nothing, I'm not saying it's like Sony's fault and only Sony's fault, so just want to make that kind of clear. Let me know what you think. Make sure you're subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.